Hello everybody, sorry about that. My camera's not working and I don't know why. Hang on, stand by. Why's my camera not working? I think I know what's going on. I think Discord might have hold of my camera. Hang on 1 second. Why? Trying to see if Discord. There we go. There's Discord. Still hanging in Task Manager. I think I got it. Let's see if the camera works. Nope, still no camera. Hang on. Okay, I think I'm probably going to have to restart OBS. Hang on 1 second. All right, we should be back. I'm sorry about that. It would seem that Discord still had hold of the camera. I'd just been on a Discord chat, and it would seem that Discord decided it was going to keep hold of the camera. So I'm sorry about that. Not a great way to start the show, but anyway, such is life. Life will do that sometimes. Anyway, should we start? So hopefully you guys can now see me, I hope. It looks like I'm looking in the stream preview and it looks like you guys can see me, which is good. All right, so welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. And I am very sorry about the very, very messy start to the show. But yeah, I was not expecting Discord to still have hold of the camera because the blue light on my camera was not on. So it should not have been, that should not have happened. But anyway, such is life. Such is technology. Technology can certainly fail us at times. So anyway, let's get this show underway, shall we? Because we're a few minutes over time. I think Boris was actually the first one in. I think. Let me double check that. I think Boris was first. Oh no, it's Billy Morgan. Billy Morgan was first in. Well done, Billy. Followed by Boris, followed by John Hawk, and Chris Manrackner is here as well. DJ Vu and Christina over in Denmark is still awake, and she is here. She's rocking it over in Denmark. Thank you very much for coming. Kyle is here, Just Bob is here, Don Oliver, Brett Marler, and Ron Figueroa is here as well. David Young is here. Hello, David. Good to see you. And I think that's it. There we go. DJ says, no problem, we're waiting patiently because we want to meet you. Yes, you guys, some of you guys have been waiting here for quite a while before the show started. So thank you very much for your patience, and I'm sorry that we didn't have any camera to start with. But we do have, hang on, I got a real itch. We do have a great question to kick the show off with. I do want to get into starting to talk about harmony writing, and how best to go about doing that. So if you're wanting to write vocal harmonies, or if you're wanting to write for a horn section, writing for a horn section or for strings is complicated and it's tricky. There are pitfalls that you can very easily fall into if you don't know the instrumentation, you don't know how those instruments work and how to write for those instruments. It can be a little bit tricky. It's not impossible though. There are some very simple things that you can do and not do. And if you kind of go by those guidelines, you'll do fine. And then you can start to stretch out a little bit once you start getting used to how voices should move, and voice leading and things like that. So you get that when you're writing for vocals, for a vocal group or for a choir anyway. Voice leading is really important. So we'll get on to that in just a wee minute. Just Bob says he'll be around for a while, but he has to get up at 2:30 for work again. Good grief. Wow. That is a very, very early start, or a very late start. I'm not sure which way round it is. So, Boris's question. He says, pop tune. Section A is E minor, F sharp minor, B minor, B minor 9. B section is G major 9, A6, D6, E flat major 7. What mode would you choose to compose a melody? Now, this is a good question. Because we have been talking about melody writing. And I think one of the things that I want to hammer home to kind of, put a kind of closing page on the chapter of melody writing, to summarize, one of the best ways that you can begin to develop effective melodies is to make use of the notes that are in the chords. So don't just rely upon a mode or a scale, but make use of the notes of the chord. They're there. They're there to be made use of. And then, like I said, if you treat each of those chord tones as kind of, I think the analogy I used was a street with houses on the street and getting from one to the next house. And you're either going to go, kind of out the front door, up the pathway, and then next door, down the pathway, and into the front door of the next house. Or you're going to go out one of the upstairs bedroom windows onto the roof and then clamber over onto the next house's roof and then in through a bedroom upstairs or a bathroom upstairs. So, there's kind of two different ways that you can approach that. So what am I talking about there? I'm talking about the difference between diatonic and chromatic approaches. So diatonic approach would be going out of the door, walking up the driveway or the pathway, turning either left or right to go next door, and then go down the path, knock on the front door, and they open the front door and in you go. So that's the diatonic route. So basically we're talking scale notes or chord tones. So if we take a C major scale and each one of those notes is a next door neighbor note. And this is a case of I'm going from C to D. So I'm going up the driveway of C, going left because I'm going up. And then I go and I knock on the next door and they open the door. And now I've gone into door number D or door letter D. And then so on and so forth up the whole scale. And if you were to imagine that these black notes are the roofs of the houses, and so then you can approach that D chromatically. You could say, I don't want to go and knock on the front door. What I want to do is I want to go over the roof and clamber in through the bathroom. And so that is what we would call a chromatic approach. So diatonic would be chromatic. Okay? So you can do this with each of the chord tones in a C major chord. There's our C major, all right? So let's take a diatonic approach to each one of these chord tones. So we've got the root, the third, and the fifth. So to get to the E, I can use the D as a diatonic little passing note. And that's how you start Do-A-Dear from The Sound of Music. It's using the chord tones of the C major triad, right? So the D is the passing note. That's the target note. So we're going, essentially the melody is going, but we're using the D as the passing note. And then the next part of the melody is using the E as the passing note to start with. And we've got the two Fs. And then the E as a passing note going back down. Okay, so you can use, and that's kind of coming from the D minor chord, right? Or from the G7. It could be coming from the G7. Okay, I'm not going to play too much of it because I don't want to get a copyright strike. Thank you very much. But, so, you know, this is going from chord 1. And then we're going back to... And again, this time the F is the passing note between the 3rd and the 5th chord. And now we're on a G9 chord. Fancy, right? Adds to the tension of the melody. Okay, so let's take up these chord changes from Boris. So he's talking about E minor, F sharp minor, B minor 9 is essentially B minor, and then G major 9, A6, D6, and then the strange one, which is E flat major 7. So what are the common sounds that we're associating with this? Well, this could be in G major, and we could be dealing with chord 3, chord 7 minor, chord 6, chord 7 minor, chord 3, and then chord 1 being G major, because then we get chord 2, A6, chord 5, D6, and then we get the flat 6, which is E flat major. That's kind of the odd one out. It is a non-diatonic chord. Does not belong to the key of G major. There is no E flat in the key of G major. So this is a chromatic chord. Chromatic chords are great when you introduce them to your song, because even though they don't belong to your song's key center, they provide a whole lot of color. And you got two choices. One, you could either resolve it. So you could resolve that E flat major down to the D7, and then that takes you back to G. Or the implication is it takes you back to G. Or you could be talking about it going and then up to the E minor to go back round the... And then do that one more time. And then I don't know this song at all, so I'm just kind of... So basically this E flat could just be this nice little pretty little tension chord that resolves. And then you go back round. So just by playing those chord changes in that way, I don't even know if that's how the song goes, because you only basically just gave me the chord changes. I had no idea what the context is. It would seem that the key center is not G major. To me, it feels a little bit more like... It feels more like it should be in B minor, that this is 1. So we're basically going 4, 5 minor instead of 5 dominant. Although you could do either, I think. So chord 1 is the B minor, I think. And then you've got your B section, which is kind of related. We're going down to basically chord 6 in B minor. And then we're going 6, 7, 3. But I don't think it's like that. I think the implication is that B section is in the key of G, which is kind of related by a minor third to the B minor. So they are kind of related to each other, but and that's why it kind of works. So I'm kind of thinking that the A section is in B minor. So and then that being the case, this is kind of like, I mean, you could think of it in terms of B minor, or you could think of it in, there is another way to think of it. And Boris is probably going, I'm getting lost here. Where are we going with this? How do I write a melody? The reason why I'm kind of going over these chords is because to get to the melody, we need to understand where the key centers are to start with. So that second section, I think it's in D major, actually. And this is 4, 5, 1. So I think we're dealing with relative minor, relative major. I think that makes it a lot easier because B minor is the relative major of D major. So I think we're going, so we're doing 4, 5, 1 in B minor. And then your B section is a 4, 5, 1 in D. So where does the E flat major come in? The E flat major, I think, is a pivot chord. It's a substitute for for B7 in this case. So basically, if you were to interrupt it, it would be a 4, 5 interrupted cadence going chord 4. And I put in the sneaky little B there, pivoting to the E minor there. So I think that's kind of where we're going. So how do we get a decent melody out of this? Now, you can use the chord tones. And I would use this scale, actually, seeing as we've got that F sharp minor rather than the F sharp major. I would use this B melodic minor. I would use this scale. Okay, that would be the scale of choice for me. So you're going B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A natural, B. Whoops. So you could derive your melody from that scale, and then you can use kind of the chord tones. So you could go. So that first chord is going to be E minor, right? So you could go. And so that could be your genuine melody for your A section over those. What was it? So you could go. And that could be over those chord changes. And then for your second section, your. So we are dealing purely with the D major scale here. Okay, so, but again, you can use chord tones. So what do we got here? We got the G major 9. So that's kind of like D with a G in the bass, which is what I've been playing. So you could go. Something like that might work. And I'm just using literally the chord tones. And I'm using that C sharp, the third, to lead into the D. And then you could go, you could have like a little descending figure at the end. So you could go. So you got root, 6, third. Something like that might work for what you want to do. But again, I don't really have a whole ton of context for how those chords kind of vamp together, particularly. So yes, using chord tones, and then once you've got those little chord tone things mapped out, and that's all that was. I mean, I've got a lot of experience with writing melodies, so kind of doing that off the top of my head is dead easy for me. For you, maybe not so. So make use of those chord tones, and then look at how you can do a little diatonic or a little chromatic passing note between those chord tones to kind of develop your melody, make it a little bit more interesting, and make it a little bit more memorable. So the thing to aim for, especially with a chorus, is to make the chorus something that the listener can latch onto. So make it simple. Make it a simple little figure that's easy to sing. And then repeat that. And maybe repeat that, 2, 3, 4 times, and have that as your chorus. So the listener is really hooked into that little line. And then if you give it some really snappy lyrics as well, that summarize your song, that give the punchline to your song, then you've got yourself a powerful little melody that's made out of those chord tones with a nice little, maybe slightly off-kilter, syncopated melody that emphasizes that kind of leading into the D, something like that. I am using the chord tones. The only thing I'm not using is the G. I'm not doing I could G major 7 arpeggio. I'm actually starting on the A, which is the 9, which gives you your G major 9. There's your A6. And there's your D6. So I'm just spelling out the chords. Now you can put in some little diatonic passing notes if you wanted to. Depends upon how much in the way of notes you want your melody to have. To me, that's a pretty little catchy melody, Sneaky little tritone sub there. Pop song, I know, but I couldn't resist putting in a little A flat 7 in there. All right, so I hope that kind of gets you kind of in the ballpark of what you might want to do. He said, you not knowing the context of the tune helped me back my perspective up also. Good. All right, so I'm just going to check your commentary, and you're taking notes, which is even better. Let's see. Going to try all that. Took great notes. Okay, good. Good. Awesome. So some of you have been having issues with chat loading, which is interesting. That might be because I had to restart the stream temporarily because OBS was not picking up my camera, and I had to basically restart OBS to get the camera to be picked up. Don't know why, but it did. So I'm sorry if you guys are still having trouble. But that is a belter of a question, and it's a great way to start the show. Let's go back up and see. See, DJ says, how's the challenge on the theme of spring? Yes, the challenge was the Easter egg. Basically, you had to write a song about Easter from the perspective of the Easter egg. And we have had some entries, which I'm very, very pleased about. So, if you want to get in, the deadline is Saturday. All right? I'm going to play what we have on Sunday. So, send me an MP3, which I can download, or send me a link to your SoundCloud where you have it uploaded, and I will play it on the show. Because at the moment, I've only got like 5, I think, entries. So, is there a prize? No, there's no prize. The idea of this challenge was to get you to write a song to a brief, which was to write a song about Easter from the perspective of an Easter egg. And you could be as creative as you wanted to be. That was it. That was really the brief. There was no kind of like write it in this style or anything like that. It was just purely simple. You can write it in any style you want. 90 seconds minimum, duration 3 minutes tops. Okay, 3 minutes is the max length. 90 seconds is your minimum length. And in that, you need to have, verse, chorus, middle section, guitar solo, whatever you want. But the key elements are, there's got to be a story. What happens to this egg? Have fun with that idea. What happens to the egg? How does the egg feel about what is going to happen to it? I mean, obviously, most Easter eggs are chocolate and they're going to get eaten. So you can either tell that whole story from, the egg sitting, waiting patiently, maybe even slightly excited about Easter on the shelf with all the other eggs. And maybe all the other eggs are all talking amongst themselves and they're all talking about, hey, are we going to be chosen or are we going to be left at the end and, sold off or, at a discount because nobody wants us? Or are we going to be thrown away? So they may be having that kind of discussion amongst themselves, sat on the shelves in the aisle in the supermarket. You could totally write it from that point of view if you want to and kind of go on and talk about the child selecting the egg, picking it off the shelf, or the mother does that or the father does that, and then Easter morning the egg is presented to the child is really excited about the egg and so on and so forth. You can totally write that narrative if you want. It's up to you, the perspective the way you the story you choose and the way that you tell that story. But you got to write it from the perspective of the egg, from the egg's point of view. All right, so I would suspect that ending's not necessarily going to be very happy. Certainly for the egg, is it? So, either the egg is not going to get selected and it's just going to sit on the shelf until it gets thrown away. You can tell that story if you want to. Or the egg's going to get totally devoured by, children. Or, worst case scenario, the egg is meant to be devoured by the children, but the crazy dog in the house, the puppy, is just like, I want that. And so that it just makes a dive for the egg and scoffs the lot whilst no one is looking and there's no Easter eggs for the kids. And so you could tell that story if you wanted to. And you can do it in any style that you want, okay? But the deadline is Saturday. Let's see. What else do we have here? Bob says, speaking of harmony, bluegrass singers singing in a monotone type voice have background harmonies that are monotone as well. Flattened scrugs. How does that style work? It's there's different ways. I'm not really bluegrass is not really my thing at all. But if you have a melody that's kind of hovering around one note, and there are songs that do that, how do we do the harmony? You can do static harmony, where the harmony part maybe stays here, and then the underlying chords change around that. So maybe So that note is staying, and then the underlying harmony parts are changing. So let's take 1, 4, 5. So let's say that's our melody line. This is our harmony line. So that's not very interesting. The harmony part is just going. Not very interesting. Gonna fall asleep. So what are you gonna do? Different notes. So you could go. So now the internal voicings of the chord give interest and color and decoration to our melody note, if that melody note is a static note. There's a really good example here that I'm actually leading towards of good harmony writing, and this is 3-part harmony, and we're going to use the example of the Steely Dan song Hey 19, which I'm not going to play very much of because, again, copyright. But it features this. Okay, so when we get to the end, towards the end of that song, there's a couple of very interesting things that are going on. You've got 3-part harmony. And basically the 3-part harmony goes like this. Sounds really, really beautiful and sounds really sophisticated. It's not. It's actually very, very simple. So what do we got going on here? We've got this D major. Now the melody is going. That's what the melody is doing, okay? And so we've got to do something with the lower parts. So what we have here is we have this D chord going up to the D to the G. So they're all derived from the chords of the chord changes. But it's voice leading. Everything is a next door note. Listen to what happens. So we've got this stepwise motion in the bottom part. That's our low part. What's happening in the middle part? That's what's happening in that middle part. It's not as interesting as the low part. The low part is almost like a counter melody. So it basically goes down. It goes right down at the end. So you get. There you go. So the middle part like most alto parts in any vocal sound, never resolves. I feel very sorry for alto singers because they never get to resolve. You know, they're just like. It's an interesting little melody all by itself, but it's not as interesting as. That's a really interesting low part. It's almost like a melody all of its own. And so when you put the three together, you end up with. So it's really, really effective. It's not the same as kind of bluegrass harmony, where you might have that kind of static thing going on, and you know, the melody, the harmony parts underneath might actually have some static motion going on. But yeah, bluegrass is not really my thing. I don't really know enough about bluegrass to be able to talk about it. Can you play it together, chords and melody examples? So that perfectly is, DJ. That's a perfect example of melody and chords together. Whoops. Now, obviously, for copyright reasons, I'm not really going to go very much beyond that. Let's see. Yes, the Fine Colombian. Yes, that's exactly the section of the song that I'm referring to. Mike McDonald spoke on how hard keeping those intervals was. Mike McDonald was actually not referring to that song. He was referring to the harmonies for Peg. You know, he was referring to was the vocal harmonies in the chorus, where you have. So he was being asked to sing this part here, but to put the high note on the top, and then having to go to sing that, where you've got really close intervals here. You know. And then. I've forgotten that last little bit. I've forgotten the last chord. There you go. So that's what he had to do at the end. He had to go. So it's all kind of all over the shop, but you've got lots of, you know, close harmony, you know, going on. Ah. Yeah, I don't admire what I really admire is what I mean to say. I really admire Mike McDonald for being able to pull that off. It was a combination of Mike McDonald singing, I think, 4 parts of himself, plus I think Paul Griffin did the lower part as well. So I think they did, and then they just blended their 2 voices together. So it's basically Mike McDonald and then a couple of lower parts by Paul Griffin, who is like the keyboard player on that track. But yeah, it's tough to do. Why does what Jonny is playing have resemblance to Peg? Because that's exactly the song I was playing. That was the demonstration. And that's what DJ Vu was talking about. Mike McDonald speaking on how hard it was to keep those intervals. He was referring to Peg, which is what Mike McDonald was on. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, if you've ever seen the Classic Albums TV show, they did Queen Bohemian Rhapsody. They did that for a whole show, but they also did Steely Dan's Asia for a whole episode, and you get to talk to musicians. You don't get to talk to. You get to see musicians who are on that record being interviewed about their experience and kind of things that took place. So you hear from Chuck Rainey, the bass player, Walter and Donald basically take apart some of their songs and they show different parts. Bernard Purdy is on there, the drummer. Rick Marotta, who is also one of the drummers on that record, is on that episode. Wayne Shorter, who played on the title track, playing tenor saxophone. For whatever reason, they didn't get Steve Gadd to talk about the drum solo that he played. I mean, why that got missed out, I don't know, but it got missed out. Why he was not there. And they talked to Mike McDonald as well, because he'd done some keyboard parts and then a lot of the backup vocals as well. There's other people, like there's Tim Schmidt from the Eagles, who's in the backup vocals for some of the songs off that record. So yeah, there's and Dean Parks and Larry Carlton, the 2 main guitar players on that record, are interviewed as well. So it's very, very good. If you want to check that out, it is available on YouTube. If you just do Classic Albums Steely Dan Asia in the search bar, it will pop up, and you can watch that to your heart's content. It's actually very, very good. And Walter and Donald's dry, highbrowed intellectual sense of humor comes across very, very well. They're both actually pretty funny at various points throughout the episode. So it's well worth checking out for sure. Even if you're not a Steely Dan fan, it's a great show to check out, because there's a lot to learn about arranging, there's a lot to learn about songwriting, there's a lot to learn about what went into making that record one of the greatest records ever made. And that's not just my opinion, that's a whole raft of opinions that would share that. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, also a great example of great progressions. Yes, certainly, that's definitely true. They wrote a lot of fantastic songs as well, as did Burt Bacharach. Burt Bacharach had a string of very successful songs using some very interesting and sophisticated harmony. Rick Beato is trying hard to get an interview with Donald Fagen. If he lands it, I hope it's better than the Paul Schaefer interview. Yeah, the Paul Schaefer interview's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. There's actually a really very, very entertaining video. I think it's when Steely Dan were on Saturday Night Live. I think it was when Paul Schaefer was the musical director of the band, and Steely Dan were playing something from their 2000 record, which was called Two Against Nature, and they played that, but they also played Peg as well. and Paul Schaefer was trying to be musical director of Steely Dan, and he's trying to get I think he was trying to get one of the trumpet players to play a solo on one of the songs, or he was trying to direct Walter Becker to play the John Harrington rather to play the guitar solo on Peg, and he was just like being completely ignored by everybody. It's hilarious. It's so funny. Because he ends up just looking like a complete stooge, a complete doofus. It's very entertaining. But yes, Rick Beato trying to get that interview with Donald. That would be amazing. But yes, there is the classic albums episode on Asia as well. But yes, it would be great to see if there are... if Rick Beato apparently is trying to get interviews with everybody that was on Asia as well, that would be good. 2024. So it's a long time since Asia was out. Asia came out in 1977, and it was pretty much the record that changed my life, to be honest. That and Buddy Rich's Time Check, which I think came out in the same year. Both those records just totally blew my mind, and I was just like, I have to do that. I have to be a musician. I have to do what I'm hearing on those records. So that's kind of what I always wanted to do. So we got about 10 minutes left, and yes, it is Asia, AJA, Asia. Apparently so named. One of Donald and Walter's friends was married to this Asian woman. I think she was Polynesian. She might have been Polynesian. And her name was actually Asia. And they really liked her. She was this, small, little, beautiful Polynesian woman married to one of their friends. And they all got along beautifully. And they thought, hey, it's a great name for this record that we're making. So that's why it got called Asia, for that reason. And the title track is all about kind of like, being in a relationship, a nice, quiet, romantic, tranquil relationship with a beautiful woman in a beautiful location. That's kind of, an exotic location with an exotic woman. Why do pieces such as Vivaldi's Four Seasons so fantastically convey the mood and emotions, even though they did not use jazz progressions? That's a controversial question. I think Vivaldi was ahead of his time, and I think I mentioned this in a previous episode of this show. He was ahead of his time because actually the Four Seasons isn't just a work in four movements for strings. It's more than just a concerto for strings. It's a tone poem. He beautifully captures the mood of each of the four seasons in a musical era where that was not even thought of yet. Tone poems didn't come until the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. The first, the last decade of the 19th century and the first decade of the 20th century. That's really when tone poems were born. What is a tone poem? It's basically using tones, music, sound to convey poetry or convey an image, convey a mood, an emotion. And so Vivaldi was probably about 400 years ahead of his time. He foresaw this style. He foresaw this idea. And yes, you're absolutely right. The Four Seasons is a wonderwork for the fact that it does capture the mood and the emotion of each of the seasons. Winter is very bleak sounding. Spring is very tumultuous because, spring can have, you know, volatile extremes of weather before eventually you get summertime, and you get the warmth and the lushness of the sunshine and the soft, gentle winds and that kind of thing. And then you get into winter where it's cold and it's dark. He captures every one of those within the period of music that he inhabited, which was towards the latter half of the Baroque period. And harmonically, he had a very advanced harmonic palette and actually had quite considerable influence on Johann Sebastian Bach. They actually shared quite a lot of harmonic ideas. Interestingly enough, his harmonic palette is not as basic or as simple as you think, and neither is Bach's, even though they were both Baroque composers. And they predate a lot of the harmonic developments that would become classical music, by people like Handel and Mozart, and then later on Beethoven. And then Beethoven, pushed the harmonic and stylistic envelopes even further, which becomes the Romantic period. And then you get Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky and people like that. But it all starts really with the well, it doesn't all start with the Baroque period, but the Baroque period is really where harmony came to the fore, really, and became really, really essential and important, mostly because equal temperament developed at the same time. So, important technological developments in instruments and the manufacture of instruments, plus this agreement of how many semitones should there be in an octave, and exactly how wide should each of these semitones be, was all decided round about that kind of time. So, an important time for music. And yes, how did he do it? It's a tough question. Can't really answer it in one show, because really, we would be outside of the scope of Songwriting Simplified, because we would have to get into kind of more an undergrad or postgrad level of understanding of musicology to be able to really dig into a question like that. But it's a great question. All right, so we got 4 minutes left. And Tony says he fell into a lovely sleep waiting for this show, so I'll take it from the beginning tomorrow. Cool. Yes, please do. And DJ is absolutely right. All of these artists lived in different times and different cultures and different countries, actually. And they all had different access to different musics being developed at the time. Yes, you're quite right. All spread across Europe. It's all European music. So, you have that German and Austro-Hungarian thing going on. With people like Handel and Mozart and Bach, but then you also have the Italian school, very much led by Vivaldi and people around him at that time. And then all of these, as travel and transport across Europe got better and better and better, trains instead of horse and carts, so you could, trains didn't come really until the Romantic period, but, better transport networks meant that, instead of taking months to get from Austria to Vienna or from Vienna to Rome, it would take just a couple of weeks to get from Vienna to Rome. And so now the Italian school and the Viennese school and the German schools are all actually interacting with each other. They're all talking to each other and sharing each other's developments. But yes, there's different operatic styles. There's the French style. There's the German style. There's the Austrian Viennese style. Then there's the European style. And if you listen to waltzes written by Italian composers, they are really different from a Viennese waltz. A Viennese waltz has a particular kind of lilt, not really a lilt to it. It's kind of, it has a particular snap to it. There is a particular thing called a Viennese snap that occurs in Viennese waltzes that you don't get in Italian waltzes and you don't get in French waltzes. They're very different. And eventually they all kind of blend together and you get this really interesting lilt in waltzes in particular as you go into the late classical period. Anyway, I am beginning to get into musicology and music history, which is for another day for sure. So there we go. We have reached the end of the show after our inauspicious start. I apologize. Sorry about that I had to basically restart everything because the camera was not working, but we are working now. So I'm going to finish the show with this. On Friday, it is Good Friday, but it is also the Studio One meetup, the UK Studio One meetup, and I will still be hosting it. So if you want to be around or you are able to be around for some of that, I know some people, they go to church for Good Friday. They have Good Friday services and that kind of thing. If you go into that, that's fine. That's absolutely cool. Absolutely fine. I encourage you to do that for sure. But if that's not your thing, then the Studio One meetup will still be going ahead. I will be here. I will be hosting it. And then we'll be going into the rest of Easter weekend. So Sunday Night Live will still happen on Easter Sunday. And for those of you that have entered the Easter Songwriting Challenge, I will be playing your pieces. So if you got one to submit, get it in. You've got till Saturday to get it done. So until then, folks, thank you very much for sticking around, and thank you very much for the great questions, and also thank you very much for your patience whilst I tried to get the show started, and technology was kind of letting me down a wee bit. I appreciate your support. If you like what I've talked about here, you like this show, please hit the like button. If you're watching, you're not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. When you're subscribed, you can take part in the chat and you can ask all the kind of cool questions that we've had tonight. So if this really floats your boat, you want to get more involved, then please do hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. By doing so, you'll know about the next show, but you'll also know about videos that I've got coming out. I've already put out a couple of really good videos. I've done my studio tour, and there's a transposing video that's up on my channel as well. Those are kind of new. There's much more new content to come that you want to stick around for. There's some very exciting things that I've got coming that I can't talk about. And you know, videos that I would love to talk about, but I'm not gonna. I don't want to spoil the surprise for y'all. So thank you very much, and I will see you all on Friday or Sunday. It's up to you what you want to do. Until then, folks, I wish you all a very good night. Good night.